Good day everyone, welcome to our new lesson for this subject, GEUS, or Understanding the Self. So, let us now start with this topic, Anthropological Perspective of the Self. Okay, so we're going to talk about these following terms. We have the anthropology, perspective, self, and self in culture. Okay, so let us first define what is perspective. Okay, so ano ba yung pananaw or perspective na tinatawag? So it is a particular way of viewing things that depends on one's experience and personality. So this is your own opinion of things, how they exist, what are they, or anything that you can say about one thing. That is your perspective. It is coming from your lens, okay, or your personal interpretation. Okay, so now we have physical organism possessing psychological functioning and social attributes. Okay, so yung self natin or yung identity natin, since we are a physical organism, we possess psychological and social attributes. Okay, sabi nga sa isang quote, man is a social being, di ba? So meaning ang tao hindi siya, it cannot live alone, it needs companion, okay, because it will really socialize, di ba? So now our self is a representation of the social aspect, okay, or you're being influenced by the social aspect. Okay, so sabi ni Joseph Ledoux, the self is not static, it is added and subtracted from by genetic maturation, learning, forgetting, stress, aging, and diseases. Okay? So, while we are growing, a lot of things will happen in our life. And sometimes, these things will add up to your experience and perspective. It will also deduct something in your perspective. Diba? For example, diba? Dati, naniniwala ako that there are aliens existing, diba? Sa outer space natin. I believe that as a kid. But when I learned science, nakita ko na wala pa namang sufficient na evidence. It's only a theory na mayroong mga aliens, no? So, when I learned science, yung perspective ko na may existence ng mga aliens, na nabawasan yon or nabawas yon sa paniniwala or belief ko, no? So because of that, it becomes part of my 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 personality. Okay, so it's part of shaping my personality, my whole being, no? So may mga bagay tayo na pinaniniwalaan dati na possibly because of experience di na natin pinapaniwalaan yan. Another example, may mga tao that they rejected the idea that there is COVID-19. Diba? Sabi nila, ay walang COVID, hindi kami naniniwala sa COVID. But when their neighbors died because of COVID-19, nabago yung kanilang perspective because of that experience. Okay? So, as life goes on, may mga ganong experiences tayo and it will add up or it will subtract to our perspective. Now, as a person, we have two aspects of our life. We have explicit, the aspect of the self that you are consciously aware. Ito yung mga bagay na alam mo na ganito ka or ganun ka, di ba? For example, kabalo ko sa own self na dili kay ko himansin. May mga ganong tao, di ba? May mga tao na kabalo sila na dili kay sila happy-go-lucky, kabalo sila na dili kay sila kanang outgoing, maulawon sila. That is explicit. That's the thing or the aspect of yourself na alam mo sa sarili mo. And then we also have the implicit. Okay? So kaya siya patago dito, no? Pero malalim. Okay? It's bigger. Why? Because there are things that you don't know about yourself. And others will sometimes tell you na ganun ka pala. Diba? For example, sasabihin nila, uy, kuan lagi ka kanang abi na ko introvert ka pero ano lagi ka kanang happy-go-lucky man day ka nga tao. Tapos you're not aware of that because hindi mo napapansin yun sa sarili mo. Yung mga ibang tao lang yung nakakapansin. Sila yung nakaka-notice. So that's implicit, di ba? You're not really conscious or you are not aware of that na may ganun ka palang attitude, yung ibang tao lang yung nag-pinpoint. Okay? So, yung mga identity natin na yun, it's because of our social interaction. Okay? That's why we are talking about anthropological perspective because anthropological perspective will focus on social interaction and culture. Okay? So, may kinalaman yung social interaction and culture natin sa ating identity. Okay, now. So, because man is a social being, nakikipag-socialize, because of that socialization, nagkakaroon tayo ng culture. Diba? So, we have a cultural identity. So, for example, we Filipinos, we have our own cultural heritage or identity. Diba? May mga tribu-tribu tayo sa Pilipinas. So, me as a person, I identify myself as part of the Manubo tribe. If you're really going to trace our parang family tree. So ganon. So we have that. Meron tayong culture or meron tayong pinanggalingan tribo or heritage. Okay, now our culture is shared, di ba? So for example, may mga Filipino traits or kaugalian tayo na distinct sa mga Filipinos, di ba? For example, mga Pinoy mangagdaog kaon, di ba? That is shared, di ba? Common sa mga Filipinos yan. You also have symbolic. Okay? So, symbolic for example sa Filipino yung pagmano po, di ba? That is a symbol of respect, di ba? We have natural. Because culture is natural. It's part of nature, di ba? Bakit nakabahag yung mga ata Manubo for example? Because that's part of being one with nature, di ba? Yung mga primitive nila na nakasuotan, yung mga ginagamit nila sa kanilang pagsasaka, di ba? All of those things are part of the natural environment. Okay, culture is also learned. Di ba? Ginatudlo ang culture, ginatudlo ato ang identity. So for example, yung Surigao do Sur hymn, di ba? Ginapa-memorize sa ato since grade 1 pa because we are being taught or the values and the identity of our province is being taught to us or inculcated to us, di ba? So that's why we learn culture. Okay, so for example, if I'm a Filipino tapos nagdako ko sa Amerika, so probably I have less exposure in my country, so mas ma-learn na ko ang culture sa Amerikano maski Filipino ko because culture is being learned or can be learned. Okay, so culture also is integrated, no? So nahalo-halo na yan siya. So for example, here in the Philippines, ang daming traditions, ang daming tribes, di ba? It's encompassing. Kahit saan ka pa pumunta ang bansa, nadadala natin yan, yung culture natin. Okay, it's also adaptive and maladaptive. Okay, so sometimes when we go to other country, so nadadala natin yung culture natin, and also we can actually adapt while we have the culture, we have the tradition, we have the custom in us personally, na-adapt din natin yung culture ng ibang tao. Okay, so adaptive and maladaptive. Or possibly na hindi natin na-adapt. Okay? So, for example, yung tita ko, sa Filipina, pumunta siya ng Canada, and then may mga kaugalian siya na nadala niya, so from Philippines to Canada. So for example, kana ganing hilig maligo, di ba? Na mag-init jud. So that is really part of our parang practice dito sa Philippines. But for countries manggod na may mga snow, malalamig, hindi araw-araw naliligo yung mga tao doon. Okay? So may ganung mga cultural dynamics, no, na possibly na-adapt natin at hindi natin na-adapt because we are resistant to change, lalo na pag medyo matanda ka na, hindi mo na gusto or hindi mo na parang gusto na magbago pa. Okay? So because culture is customary behavior and beliefs that are passed on through enculturation. Okay? So kaya yung mga bata, as young as they are, mga grade 1, grade 2, tinuturuan niyan sila ng mga cultural heritage natin, cultural identity natin, pinapamemorize yung mga national anthem, yung panata makabayan, because that is enculturation, no? That is giving them or teaching them the value of our cultural identity. Okay? Now, kung isipin natin, ourself is being shaped by our culture. Diba? So, for example, in this illustration, diba, we have independent view of the self. Diba? Yung self mo is separate from your mother. It is separate from your father, from your sibling, co-worker, friend, and friend. However, if you're going to look at yourself interdependently, okay, your self-identity is being shaped or influenced by these following people. Diba? Kasi pag sabihin natin na independent ka lang talaga. Wala ka talagang, hindi mo talaga kailangan ng sino man or ano man. Pag sinabi natin interdependent, may konting need ka, di ba? Parang konting konting support na nanggagaling sa ibang factor or aspects. Okay? Pag dependent ka naman, you are very reliant or malaki yung influence ng ibang tao sa iyo. Okay? So for example, in this other illustration here at the right side, makikita natin that yourself is being influenced or shaped by your mother, di ba? Masasabi natin, malaking or may influence talaga yung mother ko sa identity ko, yung father ko sa identity ko, yung mga siblings ko. So, for example, sasabihin mo na you grew up very you grew up very respectful because sa parents mo tinuturo yan or pinapractice nila sa bahay yung magmano po, pag gumamit ng po at opo, yung mga ganon. So that is parang an influence of your parents to you. Okay? Kaya nasasabi natin na we are interdependent. Kahit malaki na tayo, we still need our parents. Okay? Pero hindi na ganun ka grabe yung need natin na financially or lahat ng obligation nila is binibigay nila sa atin, because pag malaki na tayo, konti na lang yung kailangan natin sa kanila, but still we need them, no? We need our friends, we need our co-workers, our sibling. Why? Because these people or these aspects of your life help or shape you as a person. Okay? So hindi ka naman ganun ka dependent sa kanila because hindi naman na sila na yung nag-support sa you entirely, pero you still need them and their presence is part of your identity. Okay? So kaya yung conception ng self natin is part of the culture, and yung culture na yun is yung mga factors na nakapaligid sa buhay mo. Okay? So now, we are done with the anthropological perspective. No, that means culture, di ba? How culture shaped you as a person. We also have the psychological perspective. What does psychology tells you about your identity? Okay, ano ka ba based sa perspective ng psychology? So, what is psychology? So we have here roots of psychology, today's perspective on psychology. So psychology is being divided into 5 aspects or facets. First one is neuroscience, second is psychodynamic, we have behavioral, cognitive, and humanistic. Okay, we are going to go over with this one by one. Okay, so the study of behavior of humans is the study of psychology. Okay, so psychology is somewhat an interpretation ng behavior natin. Okay, so it's the mental processes which are comprised of our thoughts, senses, feelings, help us understand and make sense of the world and who we are within. Okay, so all in all, so it is our entire behavior, the way we behave, that is the study of psychology. Okay, now, if you're going to identify or analyze your self-identity based on the perspective of psychology, we have the following aspects. Now, we have neuroscience, psychodynamic, behavioral, cognitive, and humanistic. Lahat ng aspect ng psychology, they have their own interpretation to your self-identity and development. So may perspective sila or may pag-aaral ng mga psychologists kung bakit ganun ka na tao or bakit may ganun kang behavior, di ba? So unahin na natin yung sa field ng neurology. So neurology is about brain, the function of the brain. So si Simon Freud, he is a psychologist, meron siyang study about human development. Okay? So yung human development, may tinatawag na pleasure. Okay? Sa pleasure sa tao, meron tayong stages. Okay? So we have oral, anal, phallic, the latent, and the genital. Okay? Kapag bata pa tayo, yung pleasure point natin is yung mouth. Okay? Kaya we suck, di ba? We swallow anything na makita natin. Because that is our pleasure point, di ba? If you notice, yung mga bata, di ba, nag-thumbs up, di ba? Why? Because that's their pleasure point. Okay? That's part of them. Okay? So, parang natural or instinct yun sa kanila. So, habang lumalaki tayo, so, dumadaan tayo sa mga stages na to, no? Afterwards, after ka sa oral, naging anal naman yung pleasure point mo. So, doon naman sa anus. Okay? So, for example, pleasure mo na i-withhold mo yung thesis mo or yung the other term for the poop. Something like that, no? You're going to withhold your poop, for example, because it's pleasurable to you. So, that's anal. Okay? Phallic, the penis or clitoris or masturbation. Okay? So, habang lumalaki ka, your teenage years, na-discover mo na yung genital mo, no? Meron kang penis or masturbation, pero hindi mo pa ito ginagamit with the full extent, no? Diba mapansin mo may mga students na hindi sila ganun conscious sa kanilang genital, or yung may iba namang students that they're very curious with their genitals, diba? Yung penis nila, vagina nila, parang ini-explore nila yung sarili nila, diba? Kaya yung iba, yung mga teenagers, lalo na yung mga lalaki, they masturbate. Why? Because it's part of their natural instinct. Okay, sa ganung stage. So, sabi ni Freud is natural yun. It's part of the psychosexual dynamics. Hindi natin ma-judge yung tao because parang it will really release. It needs to release. And we also have the latent stage, and yung last is genital stage. Ito na yan, the penis or vagina sexual intercourse. So, pag adult ka na, dumaan ka na sa lahat ng stages na to at nasa last stage ka na, sa genital stage ka na. So, sabi ni Freud, it's natural for a human being to desire sex. Okay? Bakit? Because we are really designed to have that, diba? We are really designed to have that pleasure, to experience that pleasure. Okay? So, we cannot judge anybody because of their sexual actions. Okay? Yung parang point ni Freud. So, itong stage na to na interpretation, this is just parang model or interpretation ni Freud to tell us about our natural instinct na may ganun tayo sa self natin, and that's part of our identity as a person. Okay? Yung pag-seek ng pleasure. Why? Because naturally meron talaga tayong instinct na nag-seek ng pleasure. So from early age, bata ka pa, oral yung pleasure point mo. Pag malaki ka na or adult ka na, genital naman yung pleasure point mo. Okay? So, this psychological or neurological perspective is also in line with the psychodynamic perspective. Okay? So, the psychodynamic perspective, in simpler terms, ito yon, no? Sa pagkatao natin, may dalawang opposing forces that are telling us or advising us, di ba? So, we have the superego, the id, and then the ego, ikaw yun. Ikaw yung nasa middle. Okay? So, for example, um, you want to watch pornography or pornographic materials, di ba? Or you want to drink alcohol, di ba? And we know that that is wrong, di ba? From our general moral knowledge, mali yung ganun na mag-inom or manood ng porn. Okay? Si super ego will tell you na it's not right to do that. Si super ego yung konsensya natin. Okay? Siya yung clean aspect or the angel. Nag-a-advise sa atin na wag mong gawin kasi masama yan. Di ba sometimes kung may mga masama tayong balak, diba, may boses na parang nagsasabi na wag mong gawin yan. And the other voice naman is the id. Ito yung parang evil or ito yung parang nagpupush sa'yo to do it. Diba? So, sabi ni id, I want to do that now. Okay? So, sa psychodynamic perspective, kay Freud pa rin to, sabi dito is, yung id daw, siya yung nagpupush sa'yo to do the pleasurable. Hindi siya yung conscience. Siya yung parang nagtutolerate sa'yo to do what is pleasurable, what will please you. Okay? So, for example, mag-alcohol ka or mag-smoke ka or whatever. That is the id. And si super ego yung conscience mo. And si ego, siya yung nagko-compromise because ikaw yun. Ikaw yung nagde-desisyon at nagwe-weigh. Tinitimbang mo ano yung tama, ano yung dapat gawin. Okay? So, it's normal and it's part of our identity sa psychodynamic perspective na may ganung nangyayari sa atin, di ba? So, kayo na mag-confirm if totoo or hindi because these are just notions or theories about yourself. Okay, another perspective ng psychological is yung tinatawag na behaviorism. Ano naman ito, ang isa sa mga founding fathers is si B.F. Skinner. Okay, he is the father of operant conditioning. Okay, sa kanyang study, so specific consequences are associated with the voluntary behavior. Rewards introduced to increase a behavior and punishment introduced to decrease a behavior. Okay, so for example, na-notice natin nung mga bata pa tayo, di ba? For example, inuutusan tayo, tapos merong parang prize or merong parang incentive na binibigay yung parent natin and we become motivated because of that. And also, for example, sa school, di ba? You do good, you perfect your score quizzes, meron kang additional na baon or additional points kay teacher, may mga ganon. So it will motivate you because may reward. Yung punishment introduced to decrease a behavior. Okay? So pag may punishment, ang nangyayari is hindi na natin gagawin yung mga bagay na alam natin na ikapapahamak natin or may punishment. So for example, you lied, diba? Or you cheated, diba? And there's a punishment. Automatic 0 ka. Okay? So it will decrease the behavior. It will decrease the chance of doing that again. Okay? So that's for the operant conditioning. Sabi ni B.F. Skinner, nako-condition yung tao. Okay? So, kahit malaki na tayo, alam natin yung konsepto ng reward and punishment, di ba? Kasi bata pa tayo, na-introduce na sa atin, di ba? May mga bata pa tayo, utusan tayo, may reward si mama, si papa. Okay, hanggang sa lumaki tayo, alam natin yung konseptong reward and punishment. Okay? And possibly, it's parang napapasa mo yan sa mga anak mo, sa future generations, yung ganyang concept. Okay? It's part of your identity. It's part of shaping your personality. Diba? Yung understanding mo sa concept ng reward at sa konsepto ng punishment. Okay? So, another perspective is coming from Edward Thorndike. Okay? Yung sa kanya naman is loss of learning. Isa sa mga na produce niya ng mga concept is loss of learning. So we have the law of effect. It's somewhat similar to the operant conditioning. Act that produce satisfaction in a given situation become associated with that situation. When the situation recurs, the act is likely to recur. Okay? Law of effect. Ano yung epekto ng ginawa mo? Okay? So, for example, you studied a lot, di ba? Naglaan ka talaga ng oras or sobra yung study time mo. So, ang effect nun is naka-perfect score ka sa examination. So, possibly, uulit-ulitin mo na yon, di ba? Because of the positive effect ng ginawa mo. So, that's loss of effect. Okay? And law of exercise or law of use and disuse. The more an act or response is used in a given situation, the more strongly the act become associated with that situation. Okay? So, sa law of exercise, kapag lagi mo nang ginagawa yon, nag-study ka, ini-extend mo yung study mo para makapag-perfect score ka, so, ang mangyayari is, parang nasali na siya sa system mo. Okay? Na yun yung gagawin mo lagi. Napapractice mo na lagi. So, sa research ni Thorndike, reward more effective than mere repetition. Pag meron tayong reward na nakukuha from our act is mas ginaganahan tayo or mas motivated tayo. Okay? So, interpretation yun na normal yung mga ganong situation. Normal na mo-motivate tayo kapag merong positive effect na nangyayari sa buhay natin o sa ginagawa natin. And then, this perspective is just telling us na this is part of who we are as a person. This is part of your psychology. And then, natural na nangyayari yan. Natural na nangyayari na kapag may ginagawa ka, for example, nag-business ka, maganda yung production ng business mo, possibly, di ba, mag-branch out ka pa, mas dami ka pang gagawin. Diba? That's law of effect. And another thing is, yung sa reverse naman, kapag, for example, nag-organize ka ng business o naggumawa ka ng business, tapos nalugi siya, di ba? So, most likely, pag may mag-inganyo sa'yo na mag-business ulit, hindi ka na motivated. Why? Because, yun nga, with your previous experience, pangit yung naging effect. Okay? So, ini-interpret lang ng psychology ano yung nangyayari sa buhay natin. Ano yung ginagawa natin sa buhay natin. Okay? And then, we also have another perspective sa psychology is yung cognitivist. Okay? So, ito yung interpretation sa child development, no? Which is, of course, malaking part na sa identity natin yung childhood natin, di ba? So, sa study ni John Piaget, sabi niya, meron daw tayong 4 stages of development. Okay? So, we have the sensory motor stage. Tinatawag siya na sensory motor stage because we are young here. We're very young. Infants pa tayo. 0 to 2 years old, no? So, senses pa lang yung natin, parang or instinct or senses pa lang yung parang ginagamit, no? Well, hindi pa tayo conscious. Wala pa tayo masyadong parang hindi pa tayo masyadong nakakapag-isip noon. So, instinct pa lang. So, the child begins to interact with the environment, diba? So, kaya binibigyan tayo ng toys, kinakausap tayo ng parents natin because our senses pa yung parang ano natin, parang kasama natin during that time. Okay? So, that's sensory motor stage. And then we have the pre-operational stage. The child begins to represent the world symbolically. Okay? So, we have 2 to 6 or 7 years old. Okay, now, sa pre-operational stage, meron na tayong parang identification ng presence of the object and absence of the object. For example, sa sensory motor stage, binigyan ka ng bola, tapos pinaglaruan mo yung bola. Sa pre-operational stage, kapag nawala yung ball, nare-recognize mo na wala yung ball. Okay? Why? Because we already have that symbolic representation. Naiintindihan na natin na may presence at saka absence ng bagay, di ba? Sa pre-operational stage din natin na papansin, for example, yung mga bata, at this stage, naghahanap na sila ng nanay nila, ng tatay nila. Why? Because they acknowledge the presence and the absence of these things or objects. Meron silang parang symbolic representation na kahit hindi present sa kanilang mata yung papa, mama nila, yung mga bagay-bagay sa paligid pero alam nila na existent itong mga bagay na ito. Okay, that's pre-operational stage. Sa concrete operational stage naman, the child learns rules such as conservation. Okay? Yung mga conservation, yung mga rules na tinuturo sa bata, sa school for example, is dito sa concrete operational stage is nauunawaan na niya. Okay? Meron na siyang parang identifications, rules and regulations sa values na tinuturo sa school. And then sa formal operational stage naman, the adolescent can transcend situation and think about the future. Okay, sa formal operation stage naman, ano na to? 12 to adulthood. Okay, kayo mismo, nasa formal operation stage na kayo. Okay? So, alam niyo na yung tama at mali, meron na kayong parang identification sa mga abstract concepts such as love, hatred, faith, etc. Okay? So, yung stages na to, ito yung normal na pinagdadaanan natin as we develop. Okay? So, this is part of our identity. Kasi, dito hinuhubog yung pagkatao natin sa stages na to. That is coming from the psychologist John Piaget. Okay? Now, if meron kayong anak, for example, so alam nyo na yung path ng kanyang development base sa cognitive theory ni John Piaget na okay, yung anak ko 0 years old pa or months pa lang. So, nasa sensory motor stage. So, nag-interact ito sa environment. So, ang kailangan ko is bilhan ko siya ng maraming toys. Bilhan ko siya ng maraming objects na pwede niyang paglaruan. Kasi, reliant din siya sa kanyang senses pa. Okay, may mga ganon. So, that's really part of our identity. And then, another one naman is yung humanistic perspective. So, humanistic from Abraham Maslow naman. Okay, sabi ni Abraham Maslow, yung pagkatao daw natin, we have motivations in life and we also have needs in life. May mga pangangailangan ng tao. We have the physiological need. Okay, so ito yung literal na need natin like food, shelter, 'di ba? Kailangan natin 'yon, 'di ba? That's physiological need. And then we also need safety. Kailangan ng tao ng safety. That's why we make sure na yung natin bago tayo matulog, yung bahay natin safe, 'di ba? Naka-lock yung main door, naka-close yung mga windows because we need safety and part yun ng need natin. And then, we also need love and belonging. Di ba? So, naiintindihan mo bakit ang tao malungkot kapag walang love life? Because, sa interpretation ni Abraham Maslow, part yun ng identity natin na nagmamahal talaga tayo, na may feeling tayo of belongingness. Okay? And then also, yung tinatawag na STEAM. Okay? STEAM is yung parang self-confidence mo. Okay? Pag na-fulfill yung physiological safety, um, love, love mo, meron kang love life, okay yung grupo mo, meron kang friends, safe yung environment mo, okay yung physiological needs mo, okay yung food mo, yung bahay mo, nade-develop yung self-esteem natin or mas nagiging confident tayo sa buhay. Okay? Kapag naman, hindi ito nami-meet, itong love, safety, physiological, possibly, nade-demotivate tayo. Hindi tayo ginaganahan sa life. Nade-depress tayo. Okay? Kasi, yun nga, sa interpretation ni Abraham Maslow, part yun ng identity natin, yung needs natin na ma-fulfill. Okay? Lalo na yung physiological needs, di ba? And then, for example, if tumaas na yung self-esteem mo, nasa ganitong stages ka na, or stage ka na, meron tayong self-actualization. Motivation increases as needs are met. So, mas motivated pa tayo na i-develop yung sarili natin kapag develop na yung self-esteem natin. Yan yung tinatawag na self-actualization. Okay? So, yung self-actualization, yan yung parang kagustuhan mo na umangat sa buhay. Okay? For example, is okay na yung bahay mo, na-meet yung physiological need mo, safe ka, meron kang love life, confident ka. So, sa self-actualization, gusto mo magkaroon ng business, gusto mo maging successful na businessman. Okay? So, gagawin mo yun kasi natural na tataas ka or gusto mong umangat sa buhay. So, that is self-actualization. And then, kailangan natin maintindihan na bakit yung mga tao gusto nilang yumaman, gusto nila ng maraming pera, gusto nila ma-promote. Because that is self-actualization. That is a natural instinct of human being. Part yun ng identity natin, psychologically. Diba? Na mag-improve sa sarili natin, na maggumaganda yung buhay natin, umasenso. Yan yun. That's self-actualization. So, na-interpret ng psychology yung mga gusto natin sa buhay or behavior natin. Okay, now, before I end, I'd like you to remember two things in this discussion. So, our identity, yung pagkatao natin, it is being shaped by culture or influenced by culture. That's why we talked about anthropological perspective. And also, it is shaped by our natural behavior. That's why we consider psychology in this subject because merong interpretation ang psychology sa ating perspective or identical perspective or identity. Okay? So we have anthropology and psychology as factors to influence our self-interpretation sa identity natin. So that ends my discussion. I hope you've learned a lot from this topic. Thank you.